Hi everyone. Let's just wait another 2 more minutes for more people to arrive. Welcome. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Zisi, and I'm the community manager here at Browseware. I'd like to introduce you to Afsha, who'll be running the webinar today. Afsha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name's Afsha. I'm a 3D specialist at Browseware, and today I'm going to be taking you through some style creation. We're going to be turning a basic t-shirt into a cute little smock dress.
That's great. Thanks, Afsha. This webinar will be recorded, so if you'd like to receive the recording afterwards, hopefully you'll receive the recording to your mailbox afterwards. Please feel free to submit any questions to the question box. It's on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll try to answer them during this live session. If not, don't worry, we'll email you afterwards, and you can always write to support@browseware.com. All right, Afsha, take it away. I'll jump in with questions later on.
Great, thanks, Sissy. So I'm going to be turning off my camera for this webinar, just so we have a better time with, don't experience any tech issues. So since this is for beginners, I do want to go through the interface a little bit. So let's start off by explaining some of what this interface looks like. We've got the main menu at top here, which you have your normal options that you would have in any other program, but we do have one. We've got like the tools section right here where you have different options. We've got the 3D environment where you can change the lighting or the environment for your 3D window. You've got different options for your avatar. You have some options for your garment. And then below it, we have the main toolbar. So you've got different tools here that you're going to be able to use during your garment creation. We've got the horizontal contextual menu right here, which also is for some pattern manipulations work. And then below it, we've got some different little toolbars that help you with each window. So we've got the 2D window right here, and in this window you can turn on and off the grid. I like to, whenever I'm making pattern changes, I like to keep it on because that usually helps me with accuracy of moving any points or lining up to the grid. So, and then we have the 3D window to the right of it, which is where your avatar is going to be, and also the 3D garment. And then to the left side, we have the resources tab, and it has different options over here. So the 2D tab over here is where all your this is where all of your patterns live. Then we've got the materials tab, which has two options below it, which are garment and libraries. Garment is all of the materials that are going to be applied to your garment that you're working with, and libraries is where the Browseware library for materials is. So you've got different fabrics and trims that you can use from there. Then we have the 3D tab, which has 3 tabs below it. The first one is for avatars, so you can look at the selection of avatars that are in Browseware that you can use. And then we have a snapshots tab where your snapshots as you work are saved. And then there is the closet, where later on when you've completed your garment, you might want to add some accessories to your avatar. Then we also have the params tab, which is where you have the rulers and stitches. So for rulers, you would maybe save some measurements of your patterns over here. And then to the far right side is your context menu. So anytime you select something, that's going to change. So if I select a whole pattern piece, it gives me several different options. If I select a line, it gives me different options here. If I select a point, then it jumps to different options in the point. So anytime you select a different tool up here too, that menu will change as well. So in my main toolbar, I have the select tool, which is what I use to select anything. Then the texture tool to select the textures in my garments, which I have toggled off right now, but I just turned them on. And anytime you hover over any tool, it will show you what that tool is. So this one, if I hover over it, it says textures. So then going back to our main toolbar, next to textures, we have the stitch tool, which is what you're going to use when you're stitching your garment together. The assign tool to assign any trims or fabrics to your pieces. And then under insert, you have various options for garment creation tools, like if you're wanting to pattern draft in the program, or adding darts, or using the slash and spread. The pen tool also you can use to create different lines, internal lines in your piece, or new pattern pieces as well. You've got the annotate tool in case you're working with a team and you want to communicate any design changes required or anything like that with your team. You would add some annotations on your 3D garment. And then the arrange tool sort of takes you to a different window where you have these different views of your avatar's body, the front, the left and right views, and the back. So this is where you arrange the pattern pieces on your avatars. So you can select one and it shows you like the different cluster types. Next to that, we've got, if you're working with multiple sizes, you have the all of the sizes listed. This garment that I have loaded in my VStitcher right now is graded, so I have multiple sizes in here. If you're working with a new garment, you might just see only one size. Then you have another little shortcut area where your snapshots are saved. This little window right here will show you this little icon. If you click on it, if you have multiple colorways in your garment, that's where you can quickly access them. And then let's see. These are your simulation tools. So if I have a garment and I've placed it on my avatar's body, I can hit the prepare button and that will put my garment into prepare mode, like so. And you can see all of the stitches and as well as the grid on the garment. And then you've got the dress button, which you would hit to dress the garment, and finish to finish the simulation. Undress if you wanted to undress the garment, the avatar again, and then you've got some styling tool, but we'll be able to cover some of these tools throughout our throughout the demo. So what I've done is I've downloaded the basic long sleeve V-neck shirt from the cloud, and I can show you where you can access that if you were to be interested in working with this as well. So you would go to File, Import from Cloud.
Oh, well, I can jump in because we have a question here that it's about using blocks. So yes, yeah, so here are some blocks, and someone's asking if do you have to use the blocks, or maybe we could like create it straight in right in VStitcher?
Yeah, you have both options. So we provide all of these blocks. If you were to download them, you could work with them and apply whatever artwork or colorways you wanted, or you can start manipulating these patterns as a base to start off with, or you can also bring in your own DXF patterns or patterns that you created in Illustrator as well. So I'm in the cloud and I've got various different women's garments in here. We also have men's garments. So the style that I'm going to be working with is this t-shirt long sleeve v-neck. So if you click on that, well, it will bring you to this window and you've got this nice little turntable if you want to look at the garment before you download it. And then you've got this download button here. And what you do is when you download that, in your Style Zone Connect, a little window will pop up that alerts you that the garment is being downloaded, and when it's ready, another window will ask you if you want to open it up in VStitcher. But since we already have mine loaded, we're not going to go through the step of actually downloading it, but I wanted to show you that those steps so you are able to see where you can access it. So what I want to do is load up my snapshot. And when you work with graded, any graded garment from our cloud, the base size is an M. So the size that I want to work with is the size S. So I'm going to load this snapshot.
Afsha, what exactly is a snapshot? Somebody is asking.
So a snapshot is basically, well, as you work, you would save snapshots of your garment so you don't lose track of where you are. If you don't have time to complete a garment, you would save a snapshot so you can save your file and come back to it, and then it will always live here, and you'll have that same place to pick right back up, so you don't need to redress your garment at all. You might want to save multiple snapshots to track your progress and maybe different styling methods. So if I want to save a snapshot with her sleeves rolled up a little bit, you can save that. So it's a way to maybe save different styling or even different colorways you can save multiple snapshots of. So we've got my size small loaded, and what I'm going to show you is I want to show you how to change your base size to S, because if I try to manipulate this style right now in size S, it's asking me to go to the base size, and I can only do pattern changes in my base size. And we don't want to use size M right now, so I'm going to say no, and instead I'm going to go to my main menu here under Tools. If I go to Sizes and Grading, you can see on the context menu right here, it shows that M is your base size, and I'm going to select S, and in this little drop down right here, it says set as base size, so that's what I'm going to select. And then to get out of the sizes and grading window, you just have to select your select tool, and now we're back. So I'm going to delete the other snapshots so they don't get in my way as I work. And then I also want to apply a different material to this before we do anything else. So I'm going to download a material from our library, and I want to download a knit. So we're already in the knit section. You have various different options. You've got Sims and Trims, Special Materials, Woven, and then we have different partnerships with like YKK and the Etiquette library as well, Cotton Works, so you've got many options to choose from. For now, I would like to use a knit stretch jersey from our Browseware library. So you have to just click that plus sign or the little cloud sign to download it, and then go back to your garment section, and it will show up here. So there are various different ways to replace the fabric. You can drag it over the current fabric right now to replace it, or you can drag it over your pattern pieces to assign it there as well.
Can we upload every digital fabric to VStitcher? Also from a personal fabric library on my computer?
Yes, absolutely. So our fabrics right now consist of a texture image, so they're scanned fabrics where you've got the texture scanned of it, and then we also have the actual physics of the fabric as well. So if you have custom fabric that you've tested with the fab machine and you want to upload your own physics to VStitcher, you're able to do that. If you don't have the physics of your garment and you just want to upload your image texture and combine it with the physics of one of our fabrics, that's also possible. So once you apply new fabric, if it does have different physics, the stress button will start to highlight, and that means you need to update the simulation. Before we do that though, I do want to dress this. This is one of the older browser avatars, and I want to work off of the new Olivia avatar. So to do that, I first want to show you, I did previously mention that in your 3D tab under avatars, you've got all of these avatars in here. And then your base Olivia will already be loaded in here for you. So you just need to double click on her to load her up. But if you want to work with a size set, a different size Olivia, we have a Olivia size set in the cloud. So I just need to go to import from cloud again, file, import from cloud. And then I go to my avatars. And you've got many different avatars to pick here from. We've got Sophia, Lily, and then Gabrielle as well, but I'm going to select the Olivia size set. So you would click on there, and then you've got a download button, and then your Style Zone Connect will notify you that it's being downloaded. I've already got this downloaded into my VStitcher, so I'm not going to press that download button. I'm just going to start typing in here the exact Olivia that I want to use. So this is what it's going to look like. You have all of the Olivia size sets here. It gives you the different sizes in here. So if you scroll over here, it'll let you know which one is which. So we're going to load up the Olivia US size 4, EU 36. And sometimes when you double click on a new avatar, it might look like the garment's cutting into it. There are various different ways to move the pattern pieces in the 3D window to line it back up with the avatar, or you can put it back into prepare to redress. So this is what it might look like if you're trying to load a new avatar that might be a different size or shape. So I'm just going to hit the prepare button. And then I might decide to move some of these pieces down because they're a little far up on her body. So you can do this in the 3D window or in this window, arrange window right here. And then I want to go back because I'm actually not going to use this neckband later on. We're going to draft a new neckband, so I don't need this piece right now. And you do see that you want to make sure when you're in prepare mode that none of the pattern pieces are cutting into the avatar's body. So you might want to move that up a little bit further. And then I think she's looking okay, so we can hit dress. So I can go back to my main 2D window. And this is when we can start our pattern manipulation work. So every time I'm doing pattern manipulation work, I always work with trace changes on, which is right here. And what that will do is if I make any changes to my pattern piece, it will it'll represent the old line with a dotted line to show you where the old line was. And that I like to work with it on because it lets me know that all of the changes that I'm doing are accurate and no distortion has happened. So I'm going to say finish. And since we have it dressed on the Olivia, I'm going to save a new snapshot. And I like to save a snapshot anytime I add a new pattern piece or add any garment like details, anything like that. So it helps me not lose track of where I am. And then you can always remember to save your file too. You've got this little save icon, and when it's solid colored gray like that, that means you are due for saving. You've created a new change and you can save the file. So now it's not highlighted anymore. That means your file is saved. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to have edit points on, and I have this really easy tool to work with, which is the slide tool. And so I want to change the length of this garment because I'm going to be adding a smocked waistband to this style. So I can just select this edge and we're going to move it up. And look, as you can see, what the slide tool does is it moves it up without distorting the pattern piece. And it tells you the new measurements for the side seam right here. So I can do this, I can use that as a reference when I change the back piece. So I'm looking at the measurements there at the side seam of the back, and I'm waiting until that hits about 5.5. And now my update 3D update simulation button is highlighted again, which means we need to hit that. And we'll say finished. And then it's got this seam applied to the hem, and we don't need that, so I'm going to right click on it and just say remove seam. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to adjust the neckline for the style, and we can do the same exact thing here. Instead of the line, this time I'm selecting the point, and I can just slide it up nicely. And hit the dress button so I can see where that's landing, and maybe that's a little bit high for me, or so I can continue adjusting it. And if I want the slide tool off, I can also move it by increments. So without slide on, I can select that point again, and then in the Y, in my context menu, in the Y section, I can enter an increment. So maybe I want to just lower it by 1/2 inch, so I can type in 0.5. And you can see in the 3D window that curve doesn't look that smoothly, so that's what these handlebars are for. That's to manipulate the curve. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit and give it a smoother look. And then we'll do the same thing for the back. I think my back neck is a little bit high, a little bit low, so I want to raise that too. There's this point that I think might get in the way as I'm using the slide tool, so I'm just going to delete that, select it and delete it, and then move this up. And then you can see this is not a great shape for my back neckline. We want to make sure that it's nice and squared, so we'll select that handlebar. And adjust. And maybe you can even adjust this point if you wanted to. Okay, so our neckline shape is all set. I'm going to update the simulation. And this is another point I would want to save a new snapshot. So just say save snapshot. And I'll overwrite the old one since we did a bunch of pattern changes. And now what I want to do is I'm going to be adding a placket and neckband to this top. So to this bodice area, so that's what we're gonna work towards. I have inner symmetry in my piece right now, so I'm gonna cancel the inner symmetry and say keep half. And I'm gonna work towards adding a 3/4 inch wide placket. So if I want the placket this to be the center front of the placket, then I need to move my center front edge by 3/8 of an inch. So I can just type in 0.375. And then I can clone by offset the width of the placket. So we're going to select that front edge again and say clone by offset and enter 3/4 and extend to edges. And what this does is it creates an internal line in your pattern piece. And how you can tell the difference between internal lines and regular lines is that an internal line will be red and the pattern piece lines are always blue. So now that I have this, I can select this and I can slice off my placket. So I've got both of my pieces with here now. Another thing you want to make sure is that all of your grids are updated. So if your garment looks okay with the grid of 1, all of the default grids are set to 1, then it's okay to keep it that way. But if you want it to drape more naturally with the physics that were scanned for this fabric, you might want to adjust this and lower it to about 0.5 or 0.7. So I might select all of these body pieces, and I'm selecting them all together by holding Shift down on my keyboard, and then I can update them all to 0.7. And then we can do this one as well. So now we've got 1/2 of our front bodice ready. So I need to create the other side. And what I can do is select the pattern pieces and just say create X symmetry, which creates the other side for you. And when your pattern pieces have symmetry, it basically makes pattern manipulations or anything very easy for you. So if I were to continue adjusting this neckline on this side of this pattern piece, the other one would automatically change with it. And it works with stitching as well. So if I were to stitch this sleeve cap to this armhole, it would stitch the other side automatically. So it knows that these pieces have symmetry and what to stitch to what. So we've got both of our plackets set. What I want to do is once you have these new pattern pieces in your 2D window, you still need to arrange them. So I need to go to my arrange tool and just drag them into that front torso. And it's also good to use the lock function whenever you're adding new pattern pieces in your 3D window, so the styling that you've done so far does not get disturbed. So if those newly added pattern pieces, I might select them again and uncheck the under draping properties use in 3D. And before I add them back in, I'm going to go into my styling tool. Select this button underneath that says auto lock, which will lock your current 3D garment. And then when I go to add new pattern pieces again, those pattern pieces that I removed, and I check use in 3D, you'll see that the rest of my garment is locked and that won't be disturbed as I try to dress. So our old stitching is still here. We're going to have to delete that since we do have symmetry in our pieces now, and we want to make sure everything is stitched with symmetry. So I can stitch then the armhole, the sleeve to the armhole, and you can see it did, like I mentioned it would, it did both sides automatically. Then I might want to do the side seams. And you can stitch in the 3D window or the 2D window. It's up to you. And then the shoulder seam together. And lastly, the placket to the front edge. And then we're going to dress. Now, your garment is still locked, so it might not simulate fully with the newly added pieces. So I go back to styling, and you can see when I click that those old pieces are still locked. So I want to go to styling, go to advanced, select all of those locked pieces, and uncheck lock. And then I can hit the dress button to let it fully simulate together. We're going to finish, and since we've gotten this far, let's save a snapshot. And we'll save the file. Another thing I want to do, we're going to add some buttons to this, but anytime, so if this had real construction, a placket would be double layered, so it would be folded over. But it's much cleaner in 3D to use single layers with double physics instead. So what we can do is take our body fabric and we're going to clone it. And to do that, I'm just selecting this drop down. We're going to say clone fabric. Select the newly cloned fabric, go to the physics, And here's where we're going to double the physics for it. So the formula for doubling physics, you multiply the mass times 2, the thickness times 2, the band you multiply the width and length times 10, the stretch width and length times 2, and then the sheerness times 2. So you don't need to grab a calculator and start calculating manually. What you can do is hold the shift button on your keyboard and hit the star key and just type in 2 and enter. So same thing with the thickness. We'll do the same, the times 10 for the bend width, times 10 for the bend length, times 2 for the stretch, times 2 for the stretch and length, and then lastly, times 2 for the sheerness, and then just hit OK. So I want to be able to differentiate these fabrics later. You want to make sure you know, it's an easy way to tell which fabric has been manipulated to have double physics. I usually rename my fabric, and that's can be done right here with this little icon, and that will open up a little window that has the fabric name and the info. So right in front of the name, I will just add DBL, short for double. So that's my double physics fabric, and I can take that newly doubled fabric and apply it to my placket. And you see the dress button highlight again. That means new physics have been added, so you need to hit the dress button. We're gonna just finish that simulation for now. And if you, it's a good habit to, if you don't need your old materials, to get rid of them to keep your file nice and light. So to quickly do that, next to the fabric section, there's a drop down. You can just say delete unused fabrics. You can do the same thing for seams as well. I'm going to get rid of this double seam because we probably don't need that. Okay, so now we're gonna prepare our plackets to add some buttons. And what I like to do is create some placements for buttons, just to give myself, you know, accurate placements, and for, you know, you don't want them to be off-centered or be unevenly spaced apart. So I'm going to select the front edge of the placket and just add a guideline for myself. So I'll say clone by offset. And since it's 3/4 inches wide, I'm going to add a halfway line for 3/8, extend to edges. There's my guideline. So what I'm going to do is right click on it and just lock it. So that way, if I am adding guide points for myself, I can have snap to edge on, and that way it will snap to that new guideline I created for myself as an internal line for accuracy. So under the insert tool, I go down to this drop down, and you have the option of insert point. So if I zoom in a little bit, you can see it kind of snapped to that guideline I created. So I'm just going to drop the first point there, and you can see since my pieces have symmetry, it did the same for the other side. With my select tool, I'm going to select that point again, and it gives you placements here. So I did want to place it 1/2 inch below the top edge, so it was pretty much 1/2 inch, but I can change the measurement to be exactly half if I want to. And then you don't need to add all of the other points manually. You can use clone by offset. And I can, usually what I do is I measure the length of my placket and divide it by the number of buttons that I want. So I'm just gonna guess right now that I want the buttons spaced apart 2 inches, and we'll make 6 copies. That might be too many, but that's okay. So that created the other button placements for me. And I did create some extras, but we can just get rid of those. So another thing I want to do before adding my buttons is I know that I want it to be where is right over where is left. So I want to set these layers higher than these layers so that they sit on top. So I'll select these 2 layers. And the default is set to layer 2, so we're going to just set those to 3. Then I'm going to go to my insert tool. I'm sorry, that's not what I wanted. Now we can download a button from the library. So that lives in the same exact place as the fabrics. So if I go to this drop down, you have seams and trims here. You have plenty of other button libraries like the YKK one or the etiquette button library. For now, I'm going to use one from our browseware library. And these are smart buttons, so anywhere you place the buttonhole or end the button, it will know to close that edge up. So I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. So we're going to just download this first button right here and go back to our garment section because that's where it will show up. Then I can select my button, go to my assign tool, and I can drop the button here. And then it gives you, if you didn't have symmetry in your pieces, I think it still gives you this pink guideline on where to drop. Or if you didn't have these points that I created for guides, I mean. So then I can drop the buttonhole there. And if you also wanted to skip the part of having to create those guide placements, then you can also just drop your first button and then clone by offset the buttons instead of the points. So we're going to work through adding the rest.
Now that we're talking about button, we have a question here about 3D trims. Can we custom 3D trims?
So in VStitcher, you are able to add custom 3D trims, absolutely. And even if you wanted to use it as like a smart button, one of your custom buttons, you can also replace the button that I have in here. So we're just gonna finish up assigning our buttons.
If we added too many buttons, is it easy to delete buttons as you go along?
Yeah, absolutely. You can just select them with your select tool and hit the delete button on your keyboard. So we've added all of our buttons, and now all you need to do is hit the dress. So you just give it some time to simulate, and if you need to help guide it a little bit further, you can with the styling tool. We're just going to give it a few seconds to naturally simulate. And maybe we want to help a little bit in these areas. So I might go to the styling tool. And then I can use the pinch in regular mode or focused. Regular mode usually helps adjust your a bigger space around that area that you're pinching. And the focus tool focuses more on a small area.
Can you color the buttons and the buttonholes separately?
Yes, you can recolor them. The buttonholes a different color and the button itself a different color as well. You can add a new texture image for your buttons if you wanted to. Okay, so we've got that all set. Now we're going to create a waistband, a smocked waistband for this top. So it's not finished simulating, but that's okay since we're going to continue working. I'm just going to save a snapshot, save our progress. Even if your simulation is not finished, you can still save a snapshot. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my select tool, zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to add a very wide waistband so I can smock it using some shrink lines. And usually I calculate the width of it by multiplying it times 2. So if I have this, so if I select all of these edges at the hem, holding shift on my keyboard, you can see in your context menu, it shows you the total 2D measurement. So that's 31. So if I were to create something that was smocked, I would probably multiply that around 2. It doesn't need to be exact, but you can just estimate it. So I will create it probably 60 inches in width. So I have my rectangle tool, I selected it, and I clicked into my 2D window, and then this little pop-up comes up where you can set the dimensions. So here I will set the width to 60 inches, and the height for now I'm going to set it to 4, but I'm going to adjust it later. So we've got our waistband here. Now we need to add those shrink lines for the smocking. So I'm selecting the top edge, and then in my context menu in the line, it gives me options to clone by offset. And I'm gonna offset by 0.571. And we'll do 6 copies. And like I said, this is all completely up to you and your design. You can add as many or as few shrink lines as you wanted to. I don't think that, let's measure that. Maybe I inserted the wrong amount. So I might redo that.
I have a question here about shrink.
Yes.
How would one calculate the shrink?
So in VStitcher, it's calculated by percentages. So if I select this line, it's going to give me the length of it, which is the 2D measurement of it, 60 inches. And I'm going to select all of those lines, and I can show you where to adjust the percentage of shrink. Then I have all my lines selected, and then all the way, if you scroll down under edge properties, there's shrink, and it works in percentages. So if my length of this is 60 inches, you can add 50% shrink, which you can imagine that it would shrink it down to about 30 inches. So that's how you would calculate it. For me, I think I'll add about 70, and we'll see how that looks. And we can always adjust it later. So my garment auto lock is on, which is great. That's what I want to keep. And the grid for this newly created pattern piece is 1, but I want to show you the difference of what smocking looks like when the grid is set to 1, and what the difference of it looks like when the grid is set lower. So I'm going to put this in my low waist cluster. And then I'm going to move it up in my 3D window. And then maybe the cluster type, I can change it. So cluster types are the way that you want to have it in prepare mode. So you've got different options. So if you did, like if you were working with an underwear, you have options for like thong or anything like that. If you want to cluster it as flat, it will cluster it like flat parallel to her body, but I'm going to use waistband belt. That's a great option to use if you're working on pants, for any pant waistbands. And then I'm going to do my stitching. So we're going to go to my stitch tool. For something like this, I would want to multi-stitch it. So we're going to select the stitch tool, and right underneath you have this multi-stitch. So I'm going to say from, and we're going to stitch just all on those edges. And I'm only selecting one of the placket edges since we're not stitching both. And then we're going to say done. And we might need to do some adjusting in our 3D window of that pattern piece, because if I right click on the avatar, you'll see, hold on, we'll see our stitches are a little bit twisted. So I'm just turning this so they're not as twisted and don't disturb the rest of the garment. And then I'll pull it back a little bit. Maybe I'll move it a little bit more. So the better you prepare your garment in the 3D window, and the easier and the cleaner it will dress. So we'll just dress this, and we can fix it with some styling after. So before we continue with styling, I'm just gonna unlock all those pieces because I want it to simulate nicely together. So we're gonna select all the pieces once again and unlock them and dress.
What does the brush tool in the 3D styling section do?
That is, if you select the brush tool, you can select a larger area of your 3D garment to style. So I can select this and then move that area around if I wanted to. I think we didn't stitch the the band edges together, so that's why there's a little hole right there. So we're just going to do that. And we'll dress. And I want to show you what so right now this smocking looks like with the grid set to 1, and it's not, looking quite as good as, it could be. So I'm going to select the pattern piece. We're going to change the grid of that to 0.3. So 0.3 is a good grid to use for any type of pattern piece that has any smocked or ruffle edges, really. So look at how that completely changed. And to make it look even better, we're going to add some force multiply to that edge. So I'm just going to wait till that finishes. Okay, now we can select that one of the edges could be top or bottom. And then that edge, we want to add force multiply. So I usually add an amount of 2. And we want to add it to the entire depth of the waistband. So if that's 4 inches wide. And then if you hit the dress button, you'll see what a difference that makes.
What does the force multiplier do?
It sort of gives any edge a little bit of sturdiness. So it's giving that edge a little bit of sturdiness. Otherwise, all of those edges were sort of very scrunched up together, all of this entire waistband. So you can even sort of think of it as like an interface. You want it to edge, give it some of that cleanliness and sturdiness. So what I'm going to do is, right now our waistband is a little bit wide, so I can select it. Maybe we want to uncheck this and just change the height of it. We're only going to change the height to 2 inches instead of 4. And you can this is the great thing about VStitcher. Like, if you don't like the way something looks, you're not stuck with it. You continue making updates to it as much as you want. So now this looks like a real smocked waistband. And I think it's a little bit twisted. We might want to style it to be a little bit straighter. That's why the smocking is kind of going sideways. So if I select the brush tool and I want to select the entire waistband all at once, I just have to hold the Control key down. And then you also can use the 3D gizmo with styling. So right now I'm just going to turn it.
Do the snapshots save automatically, or do I have to save them?
VStitcher will usually save one snapshot for you, but I would not, I would not like rely on having the program save it for you. You should always be saving it for yourself. Because if you don't save any snapshots, you might come back to your file and the progress that you've made on styling and dressing may be gone. So we've got our waistband there. Now what we're going to do is create the skirt pieces for this. So before I do that, I do want to change my avatar into A pose because the skirt pieces that I'm add might be a little bit wide. So I'm just going to save a snapshot. This might ask me to finish dressing, so let's do that. Whenever you're trying to save a snapshot with the dress button highlighted, it will probably warn you that the simulation is not complete.
How about creating different poses, Afsha? Someone's asking, can we create custom poses?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's overwrite the snapshot and then I can explain. So this is this drop down right here where it says arms down. That is where all of the poses for your avatar are. So if you wanted to add a custom pose, you can just go to this button and then you can create a custom pose. We're going to use one that's already in here, so I'm going to just change her to A pose. If you want the simulation to be faster, you can always use the fast mode, and what that does is it temporarily raises all of the grids of the pattern pieces to 1. Because when the grids are lower, it's going to be a little bit more taxing in simulation. So it depends really on computer, but that's a great tool to use if you're trying to quickly simulate something. And then you can always head back off, and then all of your grids go back to what you had originally set them to. So if I'm changing poses, that's a thing I will probably use that if I'm working with a smocked garment, and then I'll turn it off. And when you turn it off, it starts to simulate your usual grids again. So now my smocked band looks better. So I'll probably, whenever I change poses, you can also save different snapshots for poses. For now, I'm going to just add another snapshot for the A pose. And then we're going to add the skirt pattern pieces. So to do that, I'm going to create a rectangle. So going back to my insert tool, just clicking into my 2D screen. The width, I'll start with 17.5. The height, we can try 15. It might, if it's too short, you can always lengthen it. And then I'm going to create edge symmetry for the other side of it. And what we can do is use the slash and spread tool to add a little bit of flair to that. So that's going to be under insert as well. And I'm going to drop my first slash line. I'm going to drop a second slash line, and then you get this little lock icon. So I'm going to lock the center front of my skirt. And what I'm going to do is, so if I want to add multiple slash lines, you can adjust that here. Let's add 5. And you can spread it, or you can close it. So I'm going to close the top edge. Let's see, minus 0.5, let's say. Or we can do minus 0.75. You can always, as long as you have an implemented spread, you can continue adjusting. So I think I like the way that looks, then I'm just going to implement the spread. Then what I can do is select this pattern piece, and on my keyboard say Control Copy to copy, Control V to paste. So that I've got my back piece now. Let's arrange these pieces onto these skirt clusters. So if you hover over here, it gives you an option for skirt. We're going to place that there. Same thing for the back. We'll do the same thing and put it in the skirt cluster. Now you can see in your 3 windows cutting through the avatar a little bit, so you can select the pattern piece and move it out and up. Same thing for the back, move it up a little bit. Okay. And they might be a little bit wide, so you see that it might end up cutting into her arm. And to avoid that, you can shrink the pattern piece in the prepare mode. That does not shrink the actual pattern piece. It doesn't change the dimensions of it. It just decreases the in prepare mode, so you can simulate without it cutting into the avatar. So I'm going to stitch the side seams of the skirt. Then I'm going to multi-stitch to that waistband. And we're going to select 2. Then we're going to select all of the top edges of the skirt. And say done. And we'll dress. So the grids for our skirt are still set to 1, so you might want to adjust those to 0.7. We're going to select both together by holding Shift down and just adjust the grid to 0.7. When you adjust the grid, it also might highlight the dress button asking you to update the simulation because the drape of it is going to be affected with the grid size. So this is looking great. I'm going to just finish for now because we're not done adding some pattern pieces. We'll save a snapshot to keep our progress. I think let's see, our back sleeves are not stitched, so we need to stitch those. And you can even do that in the 3D window if you want to. So you can select the sleeve edge. And hit the dress button. And I think our garment is locked also. We might want to turn off auto lock for a second and just unlock it to let it all simulate together.
I have a question here regarding avatars. Can we bring in avatars from different softwares such as DAZ?
Yes, absolutely. You can bring in avatars from other softwares like DAZ 3D, or if it's there's other ones like Character Creator. So if you do create another avatar, you can bring it in as an FBX file or a OBJ to work with. So I'm just going to copy this skirt piece because I want to create one bottom ruffle for it. I think I'm going to create a new rectangle piece for that ruffle. For this all, I'm going to turn on my fast mode just to raise our grids and make the working process a little bit faster. And the width of this, maybe we want to do this 20. Height of it, we'll do 2 inches. And we'll create symmetry for that as well. You can also add slash and spread to this to give it a little bit of a better drape. So we're just going through the same exact steps that we did for the others, for these skirt pieces right here. So the end, so this time maybe for the start, I will add just 1/2 inch. We'll just implement the spread. When you do use slash and spread, it does create some extra points. So you can select all of those points and make them a little bit smoother by changing the point type. So I'm just going to change those to smooth. Get rid of some of these extra ones we don't need. Okay, so you can continue making that smoother if you wanted to. For now, we're going to leave it as is. And I'm just going to make a copy of it for the back as well. And I'm going to use the stitch tool, stitch those pieces together. And then stitch the side seams. We're going to set the grids before we arrange and dress. So I'm selecting both of those pieces, changing the grid to 0.7. We'll put them in the arrange. And I'm going to put them in the same exact cluster as the skirt. Same thing for the back. Now I really don't want to disturb the rest of the styling that I worked so hard on, so I'm going to select those, uncheck use in 3D, and make sure my auto lock is on before I continue to dress. Okay, now I can go back to my select tool and put those pieces into these. And we'll dress. Now I'm going to do some manipulation to my sleeve because we're going to keep her in fast mode until we're nearly done, because I want this to not lag at all. So what we're going to do is add some smocked sleeve cuffs. So I'm going to have edit points on. We want to shorten the sleeve right now. So I'm going to shorten it by -2, and I'm using the slide tool for this. Actually, I want to do -2.5. And then we're going to add some rectangles for those smocked cuffs. So let's say I usually double this as well. So if this edge measures about 8 inches, I'll make the cuff about 16. And the height we'll use the width we'll use 2 inches, and we'll insert. And we're going to do the same thing here that we did for the waistband. So I'm going to be adding some internal lines to add some shrink. So for that, we're selecting the edge, going to clone by offset. And we're going to offset those. Let's see, we'll add 3 shrink lines and offset them by 5.5. So we'll add 3 copies, say extend to edges and apply. Now I'm going to add the same amount of shrink. We'll actually stick with 60 this time. 60% should be okay. I don't want to add it to that sleeve opening though, so I'm just going to deselect that. And we'll add 60%. Before we create asymmetry for it, I'm selecting the pattern piece and changing the grid to 0.3. Then we're going to create the asymmetry for this pattern piece to create the other side. Zooming out, I'm going to drag it over. I like to keep my 2D window very organized, so that's why you see me moving my pattern pieces around. And then we're going to stitch. Now we're going to arrange, and we're going to place those on the sleeve cluster, the arm. Make sure it's not cutting into the avatar and it's not twisted, so we're going to move that up a little bit. Okay, now we can dress. And we'll do the same thing for this like we did with we're going to the fast mode, and you'll see how nicely that looks, but we're going to do the same thing for here and add the force multiplier. Amount of 2, depth of 2 inches. So the higher multiplier you add, the more stiffness that edge will have. So we're going to add 2 inches of depth. Okay, and then we're going to just quickly manipulate the sleeve cap because I want to give this a nice little sheared cap. So I'm going to select this top point. It has this extra point here which may get in my way, so I'm just going to delete that and we'll adjust the shape again by using this handlebar. Then I'm selecting that cap point. And I'm removing slide so I can move it by a set increment, and we'll move it by 1.5 inches. Maybe we want to add a little bit more to the cap with the handlebar. And then what we're going to do is to be able to create a sheared cap, you want to add some corner points. So I'm going to add a corner point 6 inches up here, and the same thing on the back. So anytime you want to stitch a larger edge into a smaller edge, corner points is the way you can do that. And we'll do the same thing for the back. So we add these corner points. That means you're going to have to delete some of the old stitches that were there and redo some of the stitching. So I'm just selecting all of these stitches by marquee selecting them and just delete. Same thing for these little ones that are left. I might move this over a little bit so I can grab easily and delete. Now I can start the stitching. So we're going to stitch this edge to this edge. We're going to shear this edge, that's 3 inches, into that edge, that's 1.7. Then for easy reference, if you want to know what side to stitch to what side, I'm going to just hover over my pieces to let me know. So you can see that little orange ball in 3D window. So then this side to this side. And lastly, this side to this side. So what I'm going to do so they simulate nicely after all those stitching is select them, remove them from 3D use, put them back in 3D use, and then they're a little bit twisted, so we want to fix that. And we'll dress.
We have a question about lining. How would you add lining to a dress?
You create pattern pieces for it if you wanted to. If you wanted to keep your 3D file nice and clean and less clustered, you could also just give your main fabric a different color to fabric texture to the opposite side. So I might need to take the fast mode off for this so it simulates better. And we're going to select both of them again, put them into 2D use, 3D use. I want to fix the way they look because they're kind of twisted. Maybe we can move them down slightly. So let's try this with, I think what it's doing right now is locking those sleeves like you can see here. So we're going to select all of the pieces and unlock. And rest. Great. Okay, so you can then add a little blouson to your pattern piece for your sleeve. We're going to select the pen tool. And I'm going to just place a regular 0.5 inches down on this side, and then one on this side as well. And then I'm going to select that sleeve opening edge. And here I can just easily select that number and change it to change the dimension of it. And then these points I can move down to give it a nice shape as well. So I'm going to move those back down 1/2 inch. So at this point, let's remove our fast mode and let the garment fully simulate. We can turn that fast mode back on to help that sleeve a little bit. And the last step that we're going to do is add a neckband to the style and then a print, and we'll be good to go. So while that simulates, I can add my rectangle for the neckband. And to calculate that, you're going to measure the neckline, 1/2 of it, and add a rectangle. So we'll just pause that for now. I'm going to select 1/2 of my neckline, and that measures 9.8. So we're going to insert a rectangle. The height of it is going to be 3/4 of an inch, so 9.8 times 0.75. And we can give it a nice curve by moving this corner point in 0.5 inches, maybe 0.75. And change the curve type from sharp to curved. Zoom in a little bit, change this nice curved edge. And then create edge symmetry for it. So then we can bring it into 3D use by arranging it, putting it on the back neck as a collar. And at this point, I do maybe want to lock my garment again because I don't want that neckband to pull up the rest of the garment as it simulates. So I'm just going to uncheck 3D, use in 3D, and then recheck it. Okay, and now we want to multi-stitch this. So I'm going to multi-stitch, select one of the edges, and then to the placket, the neck, and the back neck. And we only need to do that. Oops, I think we didn't select two. So from the collar to the placket, front neck, back neck, and stay done. And that's going to stitch the other side for you. Let's dress. So you might notice that it's kind of at the top edge, and you decrease the top edge width with some slash spread. I'm going to update the grid of this so it's not at 1. Then I'm going to use the slash and spread. So for my drop down, select slash and spread, do the same thing here. Add 5 slash lines and then maybe close it by just 1/8. Oops, I think I added too many slash lines. Undo that. I said I accidentally put in 1.25, so we got to fix that. There you go. Okay, we'll implement the spread of that. Let's remove it from 3D use and bring it back in so it simulates nicely. So go, now you can see it's a little bit more closed up there. And just with the waistband, you can smooth out these lines well. So I'm going to put her back into arms down, and then we'll add a print to finish it off. And I'm going to delete the old arms down pose because the software might think that you're trying to reload that snapshot. And we'll change her to arms down.
Just to remind everyone that the this has been recorded, so you'll be able to rewatch it afterwards in your own time.
Great, so let's see. I'm going to remove the fast mode, see if that helps that simulation better. Oh, the garment's locked, so we have to unlock the whole thing first. That's why you're seeing those little holes in the garment, so we have to turn off auto lock. Select all the pieces and unlock. Then we're going to finish the simulation. So now I turned off the fast mode, and you can see my cuffs, the smocking on my cuffs looking really nice, the drape on the skirt looking really nice. So definitely don't work with your grids at 1 if you're using any kind of draping or smocking in your garment. So now that all of our pattern manipulations have been completed, let's add a print to finish it off. So I've got my final look here. You definitely want to save your snapshot to save that final simulation of it. So I want to go to my materials. I'm going to say save. I'm going to go to the fabrics and we're going to bring in a print as a fabric. And we've got this AI print, so I just need to double click it. And what that's going to do is it's going to open up the print in Illustrator and you'll get a message asking you to run the scripts, which you're going to say continue.
Would one need a special plugin for Illustrator in VStitcher?
No, you don't need a plugin for Illustrator. You can just in your AI artwork and make sure you hit continue when you asked you to run the scripts. If you wanted to use a Photoshop artwork, you just want to make sure in your preferences that you set up Photoshop as your image editor. So you just have to link the path. It's very simple. And then anytime you want to edit that artwork in Photoshop, you can edit. You just have a button that easily opens up the artwork in Photoshop for you. The same thing for Illustrator. So this just takes a second sometimes, so we're going to give it a couple of seconds. And if anyone has any additional questions at this time, it would be a good time to ask.
Someone's asking a question about the other sizes. So when you make changes to this pattern size, will it change it on all the other sizes as well, such as extra large? If this is a graded pattern.
If this is a graded pattern, we've done all of the manipulations to that graded shirt. So you would need to get rid of the grading, the old grading that was on that t-shirt, and adjust your grading for this dress because this will be graded differently. You've added a bunch of new pieces, and those pieces that you've added will not have grading, so you'll need to edit for it, which you can do in VStitcher as well in the grading window. So let's see, we've got our AI artwork here now. And what I want to first do is select the diffuse image because I know that this print is very large. I'm just going to scale it down before we apply it. So the size is at 100%, and I'm just going to change that to 20. And then I'm going to select the print and group it with my body fabric. So I'm just dragging it over and dropping it as a group. And then to easily apply a good one of these colors from my fabric to the double placket, I can do that as well. So I'm going to turn on my textures and let's apply this double fabric to that collar first. And then I can select my color for this double fabric.
How'd you get the dashed outline of the original pattern piece to stay visible while making the changes?
You have the trace changes enabled the entire time to be able to do that. So we can select this eyedropper and maybe select this pink for this collar and the placket. So we've got our final look here, and then if you wanted to render the final look, just go to this little camera icon. And your render window will open up in a second. So you can set the different lighting if you wanted to. I think all of my lighting is all set for this, so all I would need to do is just hit the render button. So we can save it to a location. And then it just takes a second or two to render the final image. And once it finishes rendering, a folder with the final image will open up. So the image is right here, and it saves it as a PNG with a transparent background, or you can choose a solid background if you wanted to. And there's our final render.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And a big thank you to Afsha for walking us through this workflow so clearly. And if anyone has any further questions, please feel free to reach out to support@browseware.com. The webinar has been recorded for you to rewatch in your own time, so expect it in your mail about next week. Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon on our next webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.